We're going to open up a mystery behind what's happening in Israel that you're never going to hear on the news. A mystery that those in the highest offices of our intelligence agencies have no idea of. A mystery that's been unfolding before our eyes. It's even been impacting your life. In fact, the very night before everything began in Israel, it was this mystery that I was sharing here at Beth Israel at the Friday night service before it all happened, the Hamas invasion. The mystery we're about to uncover foretold that number one, there would be an attack on Israel. Number two, it would take place in 2023. Number three, it would involve a massive ground invasion. Number four, it would take Israel and its intelligence agencies by surprise. Number five, it would take place in the month of October. Number six, it would happen on a specific day, on Saturday. Number seven, it would take place on a Jewish holy day, while Jewish people were observing that holy day. Number eight, it would happen on the first Saturday of October, the first Sabbath of October 2023. And number nine, it would lead to war. The mystery is ancient. How could it reveal that? I'm going to show you exactly how in this message. Stay tuned to the end. And on the way, I'm going to show you some real cool mysteries of God and Israel. This is Jonathan Cahn. All right, let's open up the mystery. I gave a hint of it in the first message that I posted on the war in Israel. But now we're going to open it up. The mystery goes back to ancient times, over 3,000 years ago, when God said to Moses, "You will count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7th Sabbath of years, that is 49 years. You will then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, you will sound a horn all throughout your land. So you will consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty, freedom, release throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property. Each of you shall return to his family. You will have the 50th year as a jubilee." This is the ordinance of the jubilee. It's a key part of God's timetable. Every 50th year is the jubilee. If you lost your land, in the year of jubilee, you get it back. You go home. Now, no nation has ever so lost its land and its inheritance as the nation of Israel, the Jewish people. They've wandered the earth for 2,000 years without their homeland. But then God brought them back, just as he promised and foretold in the prophets. In the last days, he would gather his people from the ends of the earth, bring them back to the land of Israel. Now, if the Jubilee was given to the Jewish people, Israel, and no nation has ever so lost its ancestral land as they did, and if the Jubilee is about being restored, coming home to your land, then it would fit that behind the return of the Jewish people to their homeland and the restoration of Israel is the Jubilee. Is it possible that the 50th year would be key to Israel's resurrection? To set the stage, we're going to open up some of the mysteries about this. Some of this I first revealed in the book I wrote called The Oracle. The man who was called the father of the state of Israel was Theodor Herzl. He's the one who started the movement called Zionism, the return of the Jewish people to Zion, or the land of Israel. In 1897, Zionist Congress in Switzerland to lead to Israel's national rebirth. At the end of that conference, he wrote down, he said, "I founded the Jewish state. If I said that out loud, the world would laugh at me." But he said, "The world will know it in 50 years." 50. The time period of the Jubilee. Why did he write that? We don't know. But when he wrote that, we know. He wrote it in 1897. Now, what happens if we go 50 years from 1897 when he wrote it? Takes us to the year 1947. Did anything happen? 1947, the UN votes to bring Israel back into the world. It was that vote that led to Israel's resurrection. The 50th year Jubilee. Now I look closer, and it became even more stunning. That first Zionist Congress that Herzl spoke of as founding Israel concluded on August 31st, 1897. Go 50 years from that day. It takes you to the date, August 31st, 1947. Anything happen? The UN resolution that would bring Israel back from the dead was completed on August 31st, 1947. 50 years, one Jubilee to the exact day. I look deeper. The UN partition plan was received and accepted by the UN on September 3rd, 1947, and stamped with that date, September 3rd. Theodor Herzl wrote down that prophecy, the 50-year prophecy, on September 3rd, 1897. 50 years to the exact date, bringing you to the exact event. Whoa. But that's not the only 50-year mystery connected to Israel's rebirth and its resurrection. There's more. I also revealed this in the Oracle. In the year of Jubilee, those who took or occupied your land, they have to get off of it. The last occupiers of the land of Israel were the Ottoman Turks. They took possession of it in the year 1517. Now, the amazing thing, the mystery of Israel's rebirth is going to follow that date, that year, as the last occupier before the Jewish people return. If you count 7 jubilees from that year, it brings you to the year 1867. 1867 is actually the year that the restoration to the land is set in motion. That's the year that the biblical city of Jerusalem, the city of David, is uncovered after nearly 2,000 years. That same year, the Ottoman Turkish Sultan issues a law that's going to open up the ownership of the land of Israel to the Jewish people. He doesn't realize it, but it's going to begin in that year. One jubilee later, 50 years, brings us to the year 1917. 1917, that's the 8th jubilee from the Ottoman Turks. 8, the number of new beginnings. Anything happen? In the year of Jubilee, the one that occupies your land has to leave it, depart. In the Jubilean year of 1917, the world is in the midst of the First World War, and the armies of the British Empire enter the land of Israel. The soldiers of the Ottoman Empire flee Jerusalem and flee the land. In the year of Jubilee, the occupier has to leave the land for the rightful owners to return, and so they did. In the year of Jubilee, the land you lost, your ancestral possession, is given back to you. So in that same 50th year, 1917, at the same time, the British Empire issues the Balfour Declaration, which promises to give the land back to the Jewish people for a homeland. In the year of Jubilee, everyone shall return to their own possession. They received back the land, but they were never given their ancient capital and holy city of Jerusalem. And even when Israel was voted into existence by the United Nations, they never got Jerusalem. Jerusalem was cut off from them. But count one more Jubilee, 50 years from 1917 to the next Jubilee. Brings us to the year 1967. 50 years from the Balfour Declaration, 9 Jubilees from the Ottoman Turks. Did anything happen? Yes, something big, something prophetic. The 6-Day War happened. The surrounding Arab world prepares to wipe out the nation of Israel. The 6-Day War begins on the 3rd day. Jewish soldiers, for the first time in 2,000 years, enter the gates of their holy city, Jerusalem. They come to the Western Wall. They pray, they weep. In the year of Jubilee, everyone shall return to their own possession. And so, in the year of Jubilee, they did. Now, all this has to happen for Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, to return. Because he's only going to come back to one place, Jerusalem, and only to a Jerusalem in which the Jewish people are dwelling. 1967. But in the year of Jubilee, you don't just return to your land, you're restored. You're given the legal right to your ancestral possession. You're given full legal recognition and the rights to your ancestral land. But when Israel was restored to Jerusalem in 67, it was never given the legal recognition to Jerusalem by any nation on earth. The world refused to recognize it. Every nation, including the United States. But count now 50 years to the next Jubilee from 1967, and it takes you to the year 2017. Did anything happen? Yes. And what happened was the very next step of restoration, the giving of the legal right and recognition. And it took place in America in the White House when the American president, Donald Trump, issued the Jerusalem Declaration, which for the first time in the modern world, first time since ancient times, a world leader gave legal recognition to Jerusalem as the ancestral possession, the eternal capital of the nation of Israel. In fact, a proclamation recognizing Jerusalem as the possession of Israel goes back further than the emperors of Rome, goes back to the emperors of Persia, as in Cyrus the Great. This was colossal. So we see this 50-year mystery manifesting over and over again, from 1517 to 1867, from 1917 to 1967 to 2017, and all linked to Israel, Jerusalem, and the restoration promised by God's word. But this Jubilean mystery, this mystery of 50 years, hasn't only manifested in Israel. It's manifested in America. In fact, it's affected your life. It's affected all of our lives, and even up to recent times, even up to this year. This is one of the mysteries I open up and reveal in the Josiah Manifesto. Now, we don't have time to open it up now, but to say this: the mystery is not only about restoration, it can be about judgment. And this mystery has actually determined the actual date, the exact official date, that the contagion, the plague, the pandemic known as COVID officially entered American soil. It was 50 years to the exact date of another event connected to it. The mystery also determined the exact date that our lives were changed, the exact day that America was placed under quarantine and our lives ground to a halt. The mystery also determined the end of the pandemic, the sudden collapse of the death rate to the exact date, and the event that took place triggering the end of the pandemic that the media has no idea of, and much more. But now, as I promised, we're going to bring the mystery home to Israel and to what just happened. It was a Friday night. I was to speak at the Friday night service of my congregation, Beth Israel, in New Jersey. That night, I was led to share one of the mysteries from the book, the Josiah Manifesto, which happened to be the mystery of the Jubilee, the 50-year mystery. So that night, I'm sharing of that mystery, how it's altered the course of America, how it has manifested dramatically in the last 3 years, taking the mystery up to the year 2023, and what happened 50 years before in 1973. I brought the mystery up to this year. But the next event in the calendar of this mystery was about to take place. And that Friday night, when I'm speaking about the 50-year mystery, it's the 50th year anniversary of that next event. So I'm opening up the mystery of 50 years on the 50-year anniversary. So what was that event? It was an attack on the nation of Israel. It would be known as the Yom Kippur War. It was launched on October 6, 1973. That Friday night, as I shared the 50-year Jubilean mystery, it was October 6, 2023. And before that night was over in America, the next event of the mystery would begin on Israeli soil. The Yom Kippur War began with a massive ground invasion of Israel. So the mystery ordains that there would be another massive ground invasion of Israel. The massive ground invasion took place in 1973. So the mystery would ordain there'd be another ground invasion to take place 50 years later in 2023. The invasion took Israel off guard, by surprise. So the mystery ordains that the invasion of 2023 would take Israel off guard and by surprise. In the Yom Kippur attack, the Israeli military detected Egyptian and Syrian troop movements, but dismissed them as exercises. In the attack that would come 50 years later, this year, the Israeli military detected troop movement in Gaza, but dismissed them as exercises. The attack of the Yom Kippur War took place in the month of October. The mystery ordained there be another attack of Israel in October of 2023. The attack of 1973 took place on a Saturday, the day of the Sabbath, when Israel was resting. So the mystery ordains that the attack of 2023 would take place on a Saturday, the day of the Sabbath, when Israel was resting. In 1973, the attack was launched on Yom Kippur, a Hebrew holy day. So the mystery ordains that in October of 2023, an attack would take place also on a Hebrew holy day, in this case called Simchat Torah. The attack of 1973 took place on the first Sabbath day of October. So it ordains another attack would take place on the first Sabbath day of October. Put it all together, what happened 50 years ago was a massive land invasion of Israel, catching the nation by surprise, taking place in October, happening on a Saturday, on the Sabbath, and on the Hebrew holy day, on the first Saturday and Sabbath of October of 1973. So it ordained In 2023, the end of the 50-year cycle, there's going to be another such attack catching the nation off guard. Takes place in the month of October on a Saturday, on a Sabbath, on a Hebrew holy day, on the first Sabbath of October of 2023. The first invasion would lead to war. The second invasion, 50 years later, would also lead to war. And so what just happened this October took place 50 years after the first attack, down to the exact same weekend, down to the exact same Sabbath. Now I'm going to show you something even deeper. In the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel achieved a massive victory, on top of the fact that it was prophecy, the return of Jerusalem. But 6 years later comes the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War was the backlash for the victory of the Six-Day War. The surrounding Arab nations attack Israel to undo what happened in the Six-Day War. Then there's the spiritual realm. For Israel to regain Jerusalem, that moves everything massively ahead prophetically. The Bible speaks of a spiritual war, an enemy who is against the purposes of God. He would undoubtedly stir up Israel's enemies to attack and wage war against it. The Yom Kippur War began as a calamity. It shook Israel and has shaken it to this day. So how long was it between the two events? The victory, the prophetic victory of the Six-Day War, and the counterattack afterwards in the Yom Kippur War. From the start of the Six-Day War, June 5th, 1967, to the start of the Yom Kippur War on October 6, 1973, it was 2,315 days. Keep that in mind. 2,350 days. Now, 50 years, one Jubilee after the start of the Six-Day War takes you to June 5th, 2017, the 50th anniversary of the start of that war. Anything happen? Yeah, something did. On that very day, the United States Senate passes the resolution declaring Jerusalem as the eternal capital possession of Israel. That was the beginning. That would lead to President Trump's proclamation later that year. It was a victory. And on the Jubilee of the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War, victory. So could there be a backlash from the spiritual realm, a counterattack of what happened in 2017? What happens if you add the same number of days from the start of the Six-Day War and from that victory 50 years later, add the 2,315 days? The number from the victory to the backlash, the counterattack, or the calamity. Interesting. It takes you not to October 6th, the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. It takes you to another day. How is that possible? The reason is, in between the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War, there are 2 leap years. But 50 years later, in between the Jubilee of the Six-Day War and the Jubilee of the Yom Kippur War, there's only 1 leap year. So the 2,315 days from the victory to the counterattack, the calamity, takes you to October 7th, 2023, Saturday, the day that Hamas invaded Israel. The 2,315th day, the day of counterattack and calamity, the counterattack and the calamity comes to Israel. It's the exact same number of days between the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War. That's why it didn't take place on October 6th, because that was not the exact number of days. Now I'm going to show you something else. What happens if you take the number of days between the start of the Six-Day War in 67, June 5th, and the Jubilean 50th anniversary of that day, the day of the Jerusalem Resolution in the U.S. Senate, on June 5th, 2017? The number of days is 18,263. 18,263. Now, what happens if you take the day that started the Yom Kippur War in 1973 and add the same amount of days, 18,263 days? In all those days of those 50 years from the Six-Day War to its Jubilee, there were 13 leap years. But the same number of days when you apply it to the Yom Kippur War, 50 years ahead, doesn't have 13 leap years, it has 12 leap years. The 18,263rd day is not October 6, 2023. It's October 7th, 2023, the day of the calamity, the exact day, and only because of that it lands on the Sabbath, just as it did at the beginning of the Yom Kippur War. It lands on the first Sabbath of October, to match what happened at the Yom Kippur War. What we have just seen is a mystery that lies behind the events of our times, even determining the exact days on which they are to take place. The world has no idea. CNN has no idea. MSNBC has no idea. The New York Times has no idea. You see, the ultimate battle is not of guns and missiles. It's of another realm, the realm of the spiritual. The war wasn't limited to Israel. It spread all over the earth as people in all lands rose up to chant their hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. They had no idea. They were part of a hatred and war that goes back thousands of years. It's a spiritual war. When Hamas planned out that day, they weren't reading Leviticus or studying the mystery of the Jubilee, and they weren't counting to the 2,315th day. But they were led by dark spiritual forces, the same forces that have been trying to wipe out the Jewish people from the face of the earth for 4,000 years. What this all reveals is that what the Bible says is true. Evil is real, and it's real specific. Why is it so bent on destroying the Jewish people, Israel? Because the Jewish people were called into existence by God to be the witnesses of his reality and the vessels of his purposes. And we just witnessed one act, one battle in that ancient war. And the thing is, we can identify those forces. And the same forces seeking to destroy Israel and wipe out the Jewish people are now working through our culture, warring against God and those who follow God, against you, even in the West, even in America. God is real, and the enemy is real, and at work. And so the Jewish people, when they returned to Israel, they had to learn how to fight, to battle, to war, in order to survive and live, just as they are now doing. If Israel stops fighting, Israel is gone. And so to you, the people of God, child of God, the people of Messiah, you have to fight as well. You're in a war. And so it's written, we war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Don't be afraid of the darkness, the forces of evil. Don't be silent. Don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid. Stand strong. Speak boldly against the darkness and for God. It's not just in the culture and the world, it's also in your life. You see, the same spiritual forces of darkness that are seeking to stop God's purposes in Israel are trying to stop God's purposes in your life, to discourage you, to tempt you, defile you, seduce you, enslave you, keep you in bondage, hinder you, paralyze you, compromise you and your calling, destroy you. And you can't accept it. You can't keep accepting it. You have to fight against the darkness, resist, fight, no matter what form it takes, against that sin, against that temptation, against the discouragement that's seeking to stop you in God. Fight the good fight of faith, of hope, of love, of the Spirit, of the power of God. You see, in the end, all the forces of evil that tried to destroy Israel are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. But Israel is going to remain because the God of Israel is alive, and his kingdom is coming, and his Messiah is coming. And so to you who are of that kingdom, if you live in his ways, if you'll stand in his power, you're going to win because you're actually on the winning side. Stand strong in the Lord and in the power of his might, and you will be victorious.